All right, let's get into it. So, excuse me. The primary goal of my photography is to capture the artistic side of railroads, industries, and infrastructure. While I certainly appreciate a standard roster shot, I'm much more interested in making artsy-fartsy photos that evoke strong emotions. I often prefer to photograph the mundane trains we see all the time because that's an experiment, or that's an opportunity for me to really experiment. And if the shot doesn't come out, it's not a big deal. Many of my favorite photos don't even have trains visible in them, but they still capture a piece of the railroading industry in a way that I find artistically pleasing. So to start off, just a little bit about me and my background. Hi, I'm Dee Matyas. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I started photographing trains to document what I saw for modeling purposes as a kid, but I quickly grew interested in photography as an art form itself. In high school, I took some photo classes working with black and white negative, 35 mil negatives. We had a bunch of enlargers, beautiful darkroom, a lot of fun. Don't do that anymore. Today, I shoot almost entirely digitally. Though I still will edit many of my photos into black and white in post because I like the aesthetic. Other than those few classes, I'm mostly self-taught, especially my digital photography, and most of my editing is primarily self-taught and learning from my friends and people I see online. I shoot very intuitively. I started off strongest with my compositions, and more recently, I've significantly improved my attention to the quality of the lighting, and my editing skills are definitely a lot better now too. I favor dramatic lighting and compositions, high contrast, vibrant colors, or rich black and whites. And these photos, the one on the left was taken by my father at Worcester Union Station, and the one on the right was taken by our own Kaylee Zhang in Essex the other weekend. We'll start off in Worcester, though I'm going to jump around a bit between locations throughout this presentation. Twilight is probably my favorite time to shoot. This photo is a fairly standard wedge composition, but I love the silhouetted signals and the heavy shadows on the locomotive. I think it's much more interesting than, just a sunny 4/3 shot, personally. This is in that same location, stepped back about 15 feet up onto the end of the platform. Worcester Union Station and the adjacent CSX Intermodal Yard was my most frequented rail fanning location as a teen. And it's still one of my favorite spots and might be where I've taken the most photos of anywhere else, potentially. Though I haven't done the math on that, so don't quote me. I love sunset photos, and I've begun really chasing sunsets in my photography lately. I use 3 different applications to predict when there's going to be a good sunset. They always disagree with each other, and they're always wrong, but they still are useful enough to tell you when it's worth going out and trying for a sunset shot. It's really only about 50-50 odds, but that's way better than just guessing and going out on your own randomly. So I find that it still greatly improves my odds of catching a good sunset like this one. This is again in Worcester at the other end of the platform, or, past the end of the platform. And here we're still in Worcester. This is a nighttime cityscape with Worcester Union Station, an MBTA commuter train in the foreground, and off to the right under the I-290 overpass is the tail end of the Lakeshore Limited. They actually went around and backed in because there was still only the one platform at the time, though they are now building a second one. I firmly believe that train stations make for fantastic photo subjects. And this first section of my presentation is going to show some of the variety possible with shooting different stations.
So Sarah, can I get rid of this stuff somehow?
For the folks on Zoom, can you mute yourselves, please? So Worcester Union Station itself was beautifully restored in the late 90s. That the towers were in terrible disrepair and structurally unsound, so they had to be rebuilt. They are fake. They're, I believe, mostly plaster and so forth, but they look gorgeous. And I think the interior might be nicer still. But yeah. Now we're moving on to Springfield Union Station. This is the Boston section of the Lakeshore Limited in the foreground. And in the background, you get a bit of the Springfield cityscape skyline, which I think helps add context to the trains and show more of the surroundings, more of the actual environment that the trains live in.
Where did you take this from?
This is from the parking garage at the top level of the parking garage at Union Station. Subway stations can also yield good photos. Here, the dim, moody lighting really worked in my favor. I forget which line this was, probably the red line in Boston. And elevated transit stations also work great for photos. This is in Astoria. That's the Northeast Corridor overhead on the viaduct. This was a grab shot after my friends and I finished up shooting the Hellgate Bridge not far from here. But honestly, I think this was the best shot of the day. The Hellgate Bridge was nice, but the lighting wasn't as good. This is inside the waiting room of Hoboken Terminal. Again, this is an architectural shot. You don't even see most of the building itself, but you see the lighting all silhouetted and the beautiful clock, which is why I took this shot. Newark Penn Station, quite weathered, and I love those riveted curving beams. And of course, New York Penn Station, the fog was just right in this to really enhance the photo without hiding everything. So that was a fun treat. These next few shots are going to be in Penn Station. Of course, the Moynihan Train Hall was beautifully done. And I love the way it looks. It needs more seating. There's some definite accessibility issues there, but it is a beautiful improvement on one of the greatest architectural crimes of New York history. Another shot of the beams. And here we're in the bowels underneath, or in the basement of Penn Station. I really enjoy that switch work. And it lends itself naturally to this sort of abstract, moody style. This is also in Penn Station, and it's the beginning of my panning shots section of the presentation. Pan shots are a great go-to when the scenery is not appealing photographically, and they're especially useful in low lighting that requires a slow shutter speed. In this case, it was the only way to get the train to actually be crisp and in focus was to do a pan shot. But this is handheld. I could have, done the reverse, had the background be in focus and have the motion blur on the train itself, but I really enjoy a good pan shot, and I think it really adds to the atmosphere. Pan shots are a classic for good reason, and in this case, when combined with golden hour lighting and a nice rare consist, they can be something wonderful. Again, this is the Boston section of the Lakeshore Limited. Obviously, the heritage units were a good catch, but even that AM fleet on the head end was unusual. It was deadheading in front of the Viewliner sleeper that's typically right behind the locomotives. This is in Westfield, in one of the few open stretches where you can get wide views of trains on the Boston and Albany line. Here's a Blue Hour cityscape pan from Springfield. I was experimenting and trying for a silhouette pan shot of Pan Am Freight, EDPL, but that didn't work out. I missed EDPL entirely. I must have gotten there like 5 minutes too late. I heard them talking to dispatch, could not find them. But this was a good consolation prize, I thought. Here I used the backlighting from the sun to highlight the colors in this late October leaves here. This was the other weekends. I like the gratuitous glare, but obviously that's a subjective matter, and really just up to your own taste. This shot was totally worth the frostbite. This was the Vermonter through South Deerfield, headed northbound. Luckily, they were more or less on time this day, which helped. But yes, it was very cold. But very worth it. Here's the lakeshore again through Palmer. This is another pan shot, but due to the distance from where I was standing and the relatively fast shutter speed I used, the background still has a fair bit of definition, which gives you a fairly reasonable feeling of the location, but there's just enough motion blur to really highlight the subject, which can often be challenging in black and white. But I find that the crispness of the train itself helps it pop from the surroundings in the monochrome. And why include a full locomotive in the shot when just a portion of it can make for a more dynamic image? Close-up shots are great for trying out different compositions, I find. This is the Chessie-7 at the Lakeshore Railway Museum in Northeast Pennsylvania. And she's gorgeous. Here's another shot of her, again, a close-up. And this one, I find really highlights the vibrant colors that they painted her in, which I adore, but I like bright colors. So. This is one of my favorite shots from my film days. I do sometimes miss shooting with 35mm black and white negatives, but because they were a lot of fun. But again, I mostly shoot digital today. This is a close-up shot of a CSX Jeep 40-2 in Worcester, back when you could still access the eastern throat of the yard before the construction, maybe a decade back at this point. This is a telephoto close-up of Bethlehem Steel's blast furnaces back as they appeared in 2006 or 2007. We will return here in the final section of this presentation as well. Some covered hoppers in Scranton. I love the texture of the sun coming through, filtering through the graded walkway. Backlit close-up from Essex. Again, bit of glare. I like it, but to each their own. Close-ups are also a great way to deal with a trail fail heritage unit. There was unfortunately a pony in front of this one, and I, of course, care most about the Conrail one myself. So that was the locomotive I focused on in this chase, even though it was second in the contest. This is from a shop tour of Amtrak's Rensselaer shops back at the 2019 Penn Central Railroad Historical Society meet. This is also in Amtrak's Rensselaer shops, and this leads us into the railroad yards and shops section of my presentation. This is the Juniata Locomotive Works in Altoona. This photo appears in the new book, Continuity and Change, The Lure of North American Railroads, which was created by the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. They're a great organization. I highly recommend them, especially if you like weird artsy-fartsy train photos. They're your group. They're a lot of fun. They also have a massive and beautiful collection from a bunch of huge names in railroad photography over the years that they are preserving and archiving, and they're a great organization. I highly recommend them. Still in the yard section, this is back in Worcester. I fundamentally believe that photo rules are meant to be broken, such as shooting towards the sun. I think backlit photos are wonderful. I think they're greatly underappreciated because you get so much more visual interest and contrast when you shoot towards the sun. Coach yards in Manhattan. Looking, that's Jersey across the Hudson in the backgrounds. These next few slides are from East Deerfield Yard. I actually took this shot handheld while the train was moving. Thankfully, they were just at slow yard speeds, but I didn't add any lighting of my own. This is all just the regular work lights in the yard. I don't own flashes of my own. I work entirely with found light with my night photography. So there was not actually a lot of light to take this photo. But it was possible because modern digital cameras have incredible low light sensitivity. And when you combine that with a good denoising algorithm, I use Topaz denoise, their Lightroom plugin. You can make shots like this impossible. As it came out of the camera, it was hopelessly noisy, looked like junk. But in post-processing, you can pull this out. There are some artifacts if you look really close from the processing, but it holds up remarkably well, and it makes photos like this that were previously impossible something actually achievable. Because, I mean, you would need a tripod and the train to stay put for this photo to be possible. Otherwise. Here again, handhelds is a local preparing to depart from East Deerfield. And a few months back, CSX's geometry train visited the area, and as a herald of changes to come, there have also been several other geometry trains through here lately. I think we've had 5 in the last few months. Here it is again later that night. I spent a lot of time photographing this train. It was a lot of fun. And this shot was actually possible thanks to a crew member from the train, Frank, who volunteered to move the crew SUV car out of the way of my photo. It had been sitting kind of right of center, right in the way of this shot. But he offered to move it across the tracks, and I was very appreciative of that. I love taking photos of cars within the train, not just the locomotives. Technically, in this shot, you can just make out the cab of the Jeep on the head end, but the focus is on the cars, which leads us into the next section of train photos without any locomotives in them. which is a subject that which is a type of photo that I feel is underappreciated in the hobby. Again, in East Deerfield Yard. This was 22 or 23K. I always mix up which is east and westbound. And then they went and renamed them anyways, so it doesn't matter anymore. This is looking west from the Railfan Bridge at East Deerfield. This is the BNSF grain train. Not sure if it was loaded or empty at the time. I don't remember, but I think it looks nice, and that's what matters. This is at Altoona's Horseshoe Curve. Belchertown on the New England Central. This is in Worcester, Mass. And in this section, we're back in Worcester, or we're still in Worcester. And again, you don't even need a train to take photos. This section is all photos of railroad infrastructure without any trains or cars in them. In this particular shot, I was rail fanning on the parking garage at Worcester Union Station with my father, and the light was gorgeous, but there were no trains at the right time, of course, because that's the way of it. But I decided to take the shot of my father composing his own photo because I was not about to waste that beautiful lighting. Dad's not really into trains himself, but when I was young, he'd drive me to, train club meetings, train shows, and out rail fanning and stuff. So he's often been my companion trackside when I couldn't drive. This is also in Worcester. And again, if there's no trains, shoot the signals. I love silhouette shots and I love sunset shots, and this is both. This is Pinole, California on a foggy morning. The bird on the signal, I think, is what really makes this photo work for me. Even if it is a Darth Vader, but some signal is better than nothing at all. This is Marion, Ohio, the quad diamonds, or is it double diamonds? It's 2 tracks in each direction. I never know what it's called, but they sounded gorgeous going over those diamonds, I must say. Okay, square diamond?
No, it's a square.
Oh, it's a square. Okay. Thanks, Kaylee. This is the CSX Boston and Albany line over the Connecticut River at sunset. This is crossing West Springfield is on the left side of the frame, and Springfield proper is on the right side of the frame. And I'm standing on the Springfield side of the river. I love playing with light and shadows. You can get really dramatic shots when you hide half the scene in shadow. It's a form of visual editing that I find really useful. In this shot, the leafless trees, the horizon, and the light reflecting off the rails helps to visually frame the locomotive's headlights. I love this shot. I'm annoyed at how shallow a depth of field I used so that the branches of the trees are a little soft. I want to recreate it, but it is very hard finding a train to show up right in blue hour at East Deerfield Yard. They're very fickle that way. This is at the Hoosick Tunnel, East Portal. Here again, I'm showing just the headlights of the approaching locomotive while framing it within the tunnel portal. I originally framed this shot much wider with more of the surrounding vegetation visible, but a suggestion to try this tighter crop from Kaylee really enhanced the photo. I have a few different friends who I turn to often for photo editing help and feedback, and I'm definitely a better photographer for it. I've learned so much. Even when I disagree with the feedback, I always find it valuable. I find that I learn something, and I highly recommend finding your own group of trusted critiquers if you want to get serious about any art form, really.
Like the ARS photo sig.
Yes, you should join the ARS photo sig. And here's the title slide photo again. This is from CSX's Newcastle, Pennsylvania yard. This was an experimental shot after a long day of rail fanning that region. My friend Mark was showing me around. This is, again, no lighting of my own. These are the yard lights for the workers. They just happen to have these beautiful color casts to them. I did pull up the saturation in post a bit, but that's pretty much just how it was. I love silhouette photos, especially ones like this with high contrast between the light and shadows. These next few photos are from a night photo shoot at the Shelburne Falls Trolley Museum that Phil Johnson put together. Again, well, I don't know if that was technically a photo sig event or not. I don't remember. I don't think it was technically. Never mind.
But we are still looking at potentially doing it again. We had canceled this year for various reasons. But yeah, there's a plan to do more photo shoots and that type of thing with the SIG.
Yep, keep an eye out. And if you want to join the if you're interested in the photography special interest group, just email me to get on the list. Photo-sig at amherstrail.org. Amherstrail.org. I took this shot after the end of the shoot while they were putting away the trolley. I find that some of the best shots of planned photo shoots are the ones that weren't planned at all. The ones in between the posed scenes or after all the action. That's, I think, where you get the most organic and candid stuff. And of course, don't neglect the possibilities of railroad portraits. This is from that same photo shoot inside their Central Vermont caboose. And here I'm using heavy shadows again, which direct the eye towards the subject, but leave just enough visible to fill in the surroundings in the caboose. Continuing the railroad people shots section. This is back at East Deerfield Yard, and the lighting here is from the rear track inspection lights of the Norfolk Southern geometry train, which was being crewed by CSX employees while they were inspecting the former Pan Am Railroad's track that CSX had just bought, which will then be going to Genesee and Wyoming as the Berkshire and Eastern. Did you get all that? Because I still don't, but it's pretty.
And it's curved.
Yeah, I love the backlighting. The lights on that inspection car were bright. It was weird lighting to work with, but thankfully Pan Am's less than ideal track maintenance has let the grass grow up, which wonderfully matches the high-vis vest of the worker. This is from the other weekend, the Valley Railroad in Essex, Connecticut. Here, the headlights of the crew pickup truck were positioned just right to highlight the workers as they were discussing their move at the switch stand. I assume they parked there on purpose to light up the switch stand that they were throwing, but it really worked in my favor. Here's the Valley Railroad crew getting ready on the morning of the excursion the other weekend. This is, of course, Altoona's Horseshoe Curve. I really enjoy including other rail fans in my shots. I think it helps highlight the broad appeal of trains to kind of everyone. It's not just foamers who like trains. There's something everyone can appreciate, and I like just the age spread that you see in this shot. Another shot from the Essex doubleheader. This section is the shots I wanted to include, but that didn't really fit in well elsewhere, so a little bit of mishmash. Here the trail fail combined with the line's height restrictions on domestic double stacks worked out great for this going away shot of the Penn Central heritage unit. I like that the logo just peaks above the single stacked containers, which wouldn't have worked if they were on flat cars, but because they were in depressed well cars, it worked out. Though the paint on that unit is definitely getting a bit weather worn at this point. This is in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. This was a very lucky shot. I wasn't planning it, but as soon as I saw that sunset, I knew I had to take some shots.
Meanwhile, we were all in pizza.
Yeah, they all went inside to eat pizza. This was after shooting the Essex steam trains all day. I, of course, wanted to photograph the sunset, and the catenary was really my draw. But the Acela came through at just the right time, and I'm very pleased with how these shots came out.
You did save our slice.
Yeah, no, they looked out for me. It worked. Of course, everyone loves a good snow poof shot. They're a classic for a good reason. They're always fun. Thank you. This is in South Deerfields. Market Street in San Francisco. I love those old PCC cars. Oh, the Mattapan trolley cars are on the T are also similarly gorgeous, but anywhere you go, PCC cars are very photogenic. This is back in East Deerfield. As soon as I saw that excavator, I knew I needed to frame a shot with it. I just like the contrast and the colors of how this works. This is at the Route 112 bridge in Buckland, though I think it's also Shelburne Falls. They're kind of, one is a subset of the other, sort of, I guess. I don't entirely understand the town boundaries there, but it's along Route 2, where Route 2 and 112 intersect. This is the New England Central through Belchertown. I just love that this looks like it could have been taken in the 80s. You know, you've got standard cab. I think they were all SDs, EMDs nonetheless. And, you know, just a nice mixed freight, old fashioned railroading. And this is the final section of my presentation, steel mills. I love steel mills. I just think they're neat. They're probably my favorite industry aside from railroads themselves. I particularly love Bethlehem Steel, although I never did see it before abandonment. I'm a little too young for that. But I did get to see it back in the mid-aughts. While it was before it had been heavily renovated, while it was still mostly abandoned. This was 2006 or 2007. And I got very lucky with this patched SD60, still in Conrail blue, just in front of the blast furnaces. They were working the interchange with the Philadelphia, Bethlehem, and New England Railroad. I even got a tattoo of that photo. I loved it so much. Because everyone needs a train tattoo. I mean, why not? My tattoo artist was the very skilled Jeremy McIntosh. This tattoo took 4 full day-long sessions to complete. Definitely hurt. Definitely worth it. I'm quite pleased with it. And I have several tattoos. I want more always. I want to get an RS3M, a Conrail DeWitt Jeep, because I don't know, I just love those machines. They're so cool, so weird looking. And anything Conrail I have a soft spot for, of course. This is another shot from Bethlehem Steel, again in the mid-aughts. A lot of this is gone now, I believe. The blast, and this is more recent, the blast furnaces in Highline have since been preserved and converted into a park called Steel Stacks. I took this photo as a long exposure, but only on my iPhone, which is proof that you really don't need a big fancy camera anymore to take good photos. There are still many limitations with smartphone photography. Of course, the sensors are much smaller, the glass is not as good, so on and so forth. But with computational photography, they can pull out some incredible results like this, which honestly came out better than it would have on my, at the time, very aging DSLR. And this is how I edited it. I like it in both the high contrast black and white and in this super saturated version on the right. I love the Mad Max look of the one on the left, and the one on the right is downright cyberpunk to my eyes, and I love both of them. I actually have the colored version as my lock screen on my phone and the black and white version as my wallpaper, because I just enjoy this shot so much, and every time I look at it, I notice new details that I didn't see before. And here's how that looks from the walkway on top of the High Line. They did a beautiful job with it. Here's some of the remaining track and the old Larry cars on the High Line. These were very weird. They were electric, broad gauge, self-propelled cars that carried the coke and taconite to the blast furnace skip hoists. They were electric powered using trolley poles and catenary. The wire is now gone, but you can still see the trolley poles on some of the Larry cars. They're in rough shape, but they are very neat and very unusual. And of course, an important part of steel making, especially today with the rise of electric arc furnace mini mills, is the scrapyard. Eventually, most trains will end their lives as resources to be melted down and made into something new. Here, a few old rotary hoppers await scrapping outside of Indianapolis. Here's another shot of them. I like how abstract this close-up seems. You can tell that they're hopper cars, but it doesn't make sense to the eye when you first look at it, because this is not something we would normally see on the tracks. Next, we're moving on to Cleveland in 2019. This is now a Cleveland Cliffs owned mill, though it was owned by ArcelorMittal at the time I took these. The backlit dust from the mill working was very atmospheric and really worked in my favor. The photo on the left appears in the Continuity and Change book as well by the CRPNA. But I just loved this location and I cannot wait to visit again. I have so many more photos I want to take there. And of course, the blast furnaces and gas flare from the stoves. Here's a wider shot that really gives you a sense of the scale of how massive these blast furnaces are. There's only two of them. There's one directly behind the one that's visible in frame. Even the towering bridge crane to the mid right of the frame feels somewhat pedestrian by comparison with the blast furnaces. And in the bottom, you can just make out the bottle cars being loaded with liquid iron. Even this closer shot highlights the massive scale of the furnaces above the bottle cars. And here we come to my most famous photo, I guess, maybe, I don't know. This is the photo that won first place in Trains Magazine's 2020 photo contest. The theme was in the city, and it appears in the November 2020 issue. It also appeared in the fall 2019 issue of the Steel Mill Modelers Journal. This whole set of photos should not have worked. I took these while standing on a berm, a very precarious berm with a drop off to my death in front of me. Only two legs of my tripod could touch the ground, so I had a duopod effectively. I was working with a 10 or 12-year-old camera at the time that was very noisy and not up to the task. The vast majority of these shots were horribly noisy and nothing but motion blur, but thanks to a bit of luck and some judicious photo editing, a few of them were crisp enough to work out. This shot itself is noisy, the focus is soft, there's some definite motion blur if you look closely, but it still looks great, even in print, with just a bit of editing. And I would hold this up as an example that technical flaws often don't ruin a photo, even unless you really mess things up. You can often salvage photos, especially if you shoot in RAW. You can save so much in post that you wouldn't think would come out. We did get kicked out as we were leaving because we were technically in a ArcelorMittal parking lot. Not anywhere important, but you know, they still don't like you being in their parking lot, which I understand. Here's a bonus shot of the same train a few minutes earlier as they were working the furnace. I love just how tiny the worker seems by comparison to all of this. And this final set is from the Cleveland Cliffs steel mill in East Chicago, Indiana, at control point 502 on the Norfolk Southern main line. This is a busy spot, both in the mill and the main line, the multiple train lines that come through here. Here's a view of the mill, part of the mill, more of an overview. In the lower left corner, you can see a remote controlled switcher pushing a small cut of empty bottle cars towards us. And you can just make out the operator on the front porch of that bottle car with his control pack. As the sun was setting, I got an auto rack train coming through the junction. And while that auto rack train was coming through, this intermodal joined them, which was nice timing. As I already said, catching a good sunset takes a lot of luck. And this time my luck was very good. It definitely panned out for me. I love sunset shots. I love silhouettes, and I just really enjoy this. And I even got a train at just the right time while the sun was setting. And here it is closer. You can just make it out. It's a CSX manifest. If you care, I just think it's pretty. I mean, I do care. All trains are cool, but this is a pretty pedestrian train. Let's be real here. And that's the end of my presentation. And to finish things up, here's another shot from that same location at sunset. Thank you all for coming. If you Google my name, all my social media stuff will come up. You can go to traingeek.com and I have links to my different accounts, or those are my different social media accounts where I post my photos.